Sunday on the scene at 6.
A quiet night in Baghdad so far. Iraq buys more time by apparently changing course.
The Iraqi leadership have decided to resume full, complete cooperation.
Last night we went to bed not knowing what we'll wake up to, but this seems to be a positive development.
But not enough to slow down the U.S. military shipments to the area. Tonight there is deep skepticism at the White House.
We were poised to take military action, and we remain poised to take military action.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News, reported by Brian Williams.
Good evening. It came close, very close, and it may still happen. NBC News has learned that the United States was just 30 minutes away from executing an order to launch a cruise missile attack on Iraq. That's when Iraq issued a letter to the United Nations and the Western world saying it would let the weapons inspectors in after all. But the U.S. said there were problems with the letter, conditions to the deal. That's being denied as we go on the air late tonight by Iraq. Enough of a problem, though, for the president to cancel a long-planned trip to Malaysia. And tonight, the White House is warning Iraq it's not over. It may yet happen. The U.S. remains poised, they say, to take military action. What seemed diffused this morning is tonight a fuse that could be lit again at any time. We're going to begin with the situation on the ground in Baghdad and NBC's Ron Allen.
Brian, tonight Iraq appears to be backing down, putting its faith in the hands of UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. The Iraqis saying the UN weapons inspectors can resume their jobs, but Saddam Hussein still looking for relief from years of economic sanctions, the reason he brought his people to the brink of war.
Dangerously close to pushing his demands too far, Saddam Hussein meeting this morning with his inner circle, putting his stamp of approval on a letter from his Deputy Prime Minister Tariq Aziz to the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, saying the leadership of Iraq has decided to resume working with the Special Commission, or UNSCOM, the weapons inspectors. In Baghdad, the UN's envoy calling Iraq's letter a positive step.
This is indicative of Iraq's desire to continue cooperation with the United Nations.
But Iraq attached a memo saying it wants a quick, comprehensive review, even suggesting a 7-day limit of what it's done so far to comply with UN demands to destroy its weapons. Iraq also insisting on some immediate sanctions relief, such as a lifting of the oil embargo. It also wants UNSCOM staffing reviewed, the number of Americans reduced. While diplomats sort out the details, Iraq's government claims that memo is just a wish list, not demands, and there's nothing stopping the inspectors from getting back to work. In Baghdad, a day of high emotion. In the morning, angry demonstrations directed at the U.S. But after Iraq's government backed down, festive and patriotic programs on state-controlled TV. The apparent message to the people, Saddam has won again. The government's plan shows goodwill, he says. It's good for the people. We weren't afraid, he says. We're used to threats from America. They hate us. On the streets of Baghdad, a normal Saturday night. No sign anyone aware of how close the U.S. came to launching an attack.
All of this is certainly not over, with the U.S. still not satisfied. And late tonight, perhaps another positive development for Iraq. Many of the humanitarian workers who pulled out of here for security reasons now saying they want to come back, perhaps as soon as tomorrow. And that would certainly complicate matters on the ground if the U.S. still wants to launch airstrikes. No word yet, however, on whether the weapons inspectors, the key players in this confrontation, plan to resume their work here. Brian, back to you.
Ron Allen in Baghdad for us tonight. Thanks. For its part, the White House remains in crisis mode tonight. Today, they've been to the brink of launching that attack, and because that could still happen, the president is staying home, scrubbing a planned trip to Malaysia, at least for now. NBC's John Palmer joins us from there tonight. John.
Good evening, Brian. The White House has totally rejected the terms that Saddam Hussein attached to his new promise of cooperating now with the UN weapons inspectors. The White House called this totally unacceptable and said unless those terms are dropped, Iraq faces military action. National Security Advisor Sandy Berger said the United States wants a clear statement from Iraq that it will cooperate with UN inspectors. No conditions.
Given his long history of avoiding his obligations, we have every reason to be skeptical, because we've seen this before. broken and unfulfilled promises, so-called positive answers that turn negative over time. We have been more than patient.
The president met at the White House with his national security advisors, including Defense Secretary Cohen and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Hugh Shelton, to discuss the Iraqi response, with Secretary of State Albright participating by telephone from Malaysia. The first indication of how inadequate the White House viewed Saddam's response came with the announcement that the president is delaying a trip to the Far East that was to have begun tonight.
Given the situation in Iraq, the president has decided to remain in Washington to evaluate appropriate next steps.
British Prime Minister Blair joined the United States in its tough stand against Iraq.
Any conditions of this nature are unacceptable. Compliance with the agreement must be absolute. There can be no negotiation, no further deals.
Most foreign policy experts say the president has no choice but to be firm with Saddam.
This is the time to say to Saddam, we are no longer interested in you setting conditions. We won the war, you lost the war.
The White House tonight, Brian, is setting no new timetable, but one senior White House official said a short time ago, we need total capitulation, otherwise it's going to be ugly. And he said, if necessary, we are prepared to act alone. Brian?
John Palmer on the North Lawn of the White House for us tonight. Thanks. All of the political moves and military moves took place against the backdrop of the United Nations Security Council meeting late today. NBC's Pat Dawson is on duty at UN headquarters tonight. Good evening to you, Pat.
Good evening, Brian. All eyes now on the Security Council, where diplomats began meeting just a short time ago. Based on what we heard in the last hour or so, there's one thing certain, that the diplomatic ground here has shifted dramatically in the last 24 hours, away from the apparent solidarity that the United States had built to force Baghdad to back down. Just hours after his last-minute initiative headed off a military attack, Kofi Annan emerged with a ringing endorsement of the Iraqi answer.
Last night we went to bed not knowing what we'll wake up to, but this seems to be a positive development.
As diplomats arrived for today's Security Council meeting, Annan seemed intent on pressing the Council to accept the Iraqi response as full compliance. The final decision on the Iraqi letter and the fate of the UN weapons inspections will rest with the Security Council, a body in which the United States has veto power. Richard Butler is chief of the UN weapons inspection team.
It's for the Security Council to judge what it means and where we go next.
But the U.S. now has a much more delicate diplomatic task, keeping backing for a hard line on Iraq. The consensus that Saddam was defying the UN appeared to be lost. And that consensus was centered on agreement among Security Council members and the Secretary General that the Iraqis had to agree unconditionally to resume U.S. inspections. It now appears there are different interpretations here of what unconditional means. Brian?
NBC News correspondent Pat Dawson with us from the UN tonight. Thanks. Now, if any of this seems familiar, that's because the U.S. has been at this very brink with this very leader several times before. NBC's Rick Davis on 8 years of confrontation.
This was Saddam Hussein's version of a scorched earth policy. His army in rapid retreat had set aflame the oil fields of Kuwait. But the army was not finished. Within weeks, it moved against Kurdish forces seeking independence in northern Iraq and against rebelling Shiites in the south. No-fly zones were established to protect them from Iraqi airstrikes. In 1993, U.S. and allied forces struck twice. In January, missiles hit military targets when Saddam threatened allied planes patrolling the no-fly zones. And in June, after an alleged plot to assassinate former President George Bush in Kuwait, the U.S. launched 23 cruise missiles, damaging a Baghdad intelligence facility. Meanwhile, UN inspectors kept finding Saddam's storage facilities for chemical and biological weapons and blowing them up. But complaints mounted that Iraq was hiding or moving sites. In 1994 and 95, U.S. forces again mobilized in the Gulf when Saddam moved troops toward Kuwait. Both times he withdrew. In 1996, when the Iraqi military again attacked Kurdish forces in the north, 44 cruise missiles hit Iraqi military sites. The job of UN inspectors, especially Americans, got harder. At this site, the welcome had exceptions.
Provided that you do not include the American individuals in the inspection.
If you forbid the Americans, and I must consider that to be a technical refusal to enter the site.
Last February, military action was averted by this handshake and a pledge from Saddam inspectors could work unhampered. But then last month, Saddam said no further inspections. The UN teams left Baghdad, followed by another buildup and the latest move by Saddam to avoid attack. If it works,
Saddam cheats, he retreats. He cheats, he retreats. We ought not to be surprised when it happens again.
To his people, Saddam is a hero, outwitting Americans, surviving for 8 years. Today, he's trying to play that role again. Rick Davis, NBC News.
And a programming reminder, the ongoing showdown with Iraq is the primary topic tomorrow on NBC's Meet the Press. Senator Richard Lugar and former Senator Sam Nunn are among Tim Russert's guests. He'll also talk to Senator John Glenn about his mission in space recently. We'll have more on the Iraq situation a bit later on, but first, some of the day's other news, including unrest in Indonesia, heavy rains in the state of Texas, and later on in Focus, simulating danger to prepare police who come upon the real thing.
Overactive bladder.
That strong, sudden urge. Having to go so often. The fear of wedding accidents.
If you're one of the millions who live with some of these symptoms, there's something you should know. Overactive bladder isn't normal at any age, and your doctor has treatments that can help.
Need a break? I can wait.
These treatments can help reduce the symptoms of an overactive bladder.
You want to go back?
In a while.
Overactive bladder isn't normal at any age, so talk to your doctor today about treatments that can help.
Why does Tums control acid faster than new chewable Pepcid AC? Because even though they're both chewable, they work in totally different ways. Tums Calcium naturally, rapidly neutralizes acid so it works fast. Chewable Pepcid's famotidine has to travel through your bloodstream, so it takes 40 minutes just to start working. So why does Tums work faster and cost less, and chewable Pepcid work slower and cost more?
Good question.
Tums. Announcing an amazing discovery. One-A-Day has combined the power of herbs with vitamins to help you during the cold season, support your mood, even memory. New from One-A-Day. Just what you need to feel your best.
The truck is here. Introducing the new Silverado. It's bigger. It's more powerful. It's the truck from Chevrolet.
Big trouble to report tonight in the fourth most populous nation on earth. A pro-democracy campaign in Indonesia has turned very violent. Our report tonight from NBC's Donatella Lorch.
Indonesia's year of living dangerously is far from over. Today, mobs rampaged through the streets, breaking into shops, stealing anything they could. The army, outnumbered, shot in the air. A different scene from last night when soldiers opened fire on thousands of student protesters, killing at least 11 and hunting down unarmed demonstrators.
We only use stone. We don't have bullets. We don't have protection.
A week of student-led protests is spiraling into mass unrest. It is the worst violence since May, when riots forced President Suharto to resign after 32 years of authoritarian rule. On the streets, the long-simmering student anger has taken on a momentum of its own. The students accuse Suharto's successor, President Habibie, of stalling on political reforms and are calling for his resignation. Today, President Habibie ordered troops to crack down on protesters. The people taking action are doing so unlawfully and against the interests of the country, he said. But the threat of more violence didn't stop the protesters. They prayed in front of troops and tried to convince them, at times successfully, to join their ranks. And as looters ransacked stores, thousands gathered to mourn their dead, students still demanding that the government adopt democratic reforms immediately. Donatella Lorch, NBC News.
In hurricane-devastated Central America, the effort is there, so are the supplies, but getting to all those in need still a major problem because roads are blocked by boulders and buried under mountains of mud and water. Hurricane Mitch killed more than 10,000 people, left 1.5 million homeless. Near Houston, Texas today, severe flooding continues in some low-lying areas after several days of rain there. Hundreds have been displaced. In Northern California today, a chain reaction pileup after a truck jackknifed to start it all off on a fog-shrouded Highway 99, about 25 miles south of Fresno. As many as 60 vehicles might have been involved. Early reports indicate, by the way, at least 2 deaths and dozens of injuries there. When NBC Nightly News continues this Saturday evening, it's just like training for war, but they never leave the country.
Honey?
Hello. There are some things you've come to count on. The wines of Ernest and Julio Gallo.
I don't want to buy a new PC every year till commencement. I needed one that would keep up with them. Gotta save something for college.
Let's talk about your wear. Call 1-800-GATEWAY and we'll custom build your kids a PC with an Intel processor and CD-ROM. Now for only $9.99. Or with the YourWare program, it's just $28 a month. And in 2 years, you can trade it in toward the purchase of a new one.
Do you guys make sneakers?
Call us now and let's talk about your wear from Gateway.
A friendly reminder from Grand Cinnamon Rolls.
For an enjoyable weekend, avoid things like message pads. And of course, alarm clocks. Instead, grab a big Grand Cinnamon Roll.
What better way to unwind after a long week than by enjoying a hot, fresh Grand Cinnamon Roll? Now with richer, more homemade taste. They'll make you forget that Monday is...
Well, let's just forget about Monday. They're not just big, they're grands.
The crisis with Iraq continues, and NBC is there, on the air, on cable, and on the internet. The showdown with Saddam on the networks and stations of NBC.
In focus this evening, using virtual reality to teach police officers some real-life lessons. NBC's Dan Lothian reports from San Francisco.
Recruits at San Francisco's police academy learning discipline following orders.
9 him, down, 10 him, down, 11 him, down, 12 him.
They're a few weeks away from the front lines, but in a way they have already been there.
Relax, what's going on? Okay, where is he?
This is perhaps the most sophisticated simulated firearms training program in the country, a sort of virtual reality exercise known as FATS 3.
If the range shows our officers how to shoot, we try to show them why to shoot.
And learning why means landing in the middle of one of almost 30 dangerous computer-generated scenarios displayed on a large screen. The weapon armed not with bullets but a laser and connected to an air tank, giving the feel of a real gun being fired.
Step out of the vehicle, now!
Recruit Ted Mullins is attempting to arrest a suspect after a car chase when suddenly the suspect pulls a gun. A split-second decision to take cover and respond. Mullins was able to stop the suspect. All of his shots replayed and marked with colored dots on the screen.
Ted, why don't you tell me about that? What happened?
Now he must explain why he did what he did.
It's so realistic once you go through this that once I encounter that situation in the real world, I think a lot of it's going to become second nature.
All of these recruits must pass the firearms program twice to be fully authorized to go on patrol.
We're evaluating them to go out into the street with an awesome amount of responsibility.
Before taking the second test, recruits have to run through a course, scale fences, and run up these steps. Out of breath and tense, now facing a virtual reality life or death situation. It's stress graduates of the program now find helpful out on the streets.
You know, when you have to actually see it and do it, and then just based on how you would react to it is a plus.
And the result, says Police Chief Fred Lau,
I think it has a real positive impact. Our officer-involved shootings are on the decrease.
And that's the goal, preparing the men and women in blue to stay cool in hot situations. Dan Lothian, NBC News, San Francisco.
And we continue law, justice, and capital punishment.
I'm here with Clarissa, who recently found out how easy it is to find phone numbers using 1010-9000.
Well, after I had Susie, there were lots of people all over the country I wanted to call.
And lots of phone numbers to find.
Yes, but with 1010-9000, I was able to find everyone's number from Boston to Seattle.
And you didn't even need their area codes.
No, thank goodness. I just told the operators whose numbers I needed and where they lived.
Pretty easy, huh?
Yeah, it was.
1010-9000, directory assistance for everyone in America. That goes for you, too.
When they said the world didn't need another nose strip, we said, oh yeah? How about making one that's contoured for a good fit, giving it a centering bump so you know where to place it, and using a skin-friendly adhesive? Introducing Clear Passage, an ergonomically advanced nose strip designed to relieve the symptoms of nasal congestion. Oh, and one last thing. How about having it made by the maker of Afrin Nasal Spray, the people who know more about the nose than anyone? New Clear Passage. We know noses.
With its wider track and precise cornering, nothing can contain the White Track Grand Prix, not even your television. Stand by as we adjust your screen. Now you can catch the White Track Grand Prix GT and experience its outstanding cornering and control. Drive it for yourself and see why wider is better. The White Track Grand Prix by Pontiac. Now you can lease the Grand Prix GT sedan for just $269 a month. See your Pontiac dealer today.
You have been asleep for over 7 years. Your mission will change the course of history. But first, you've really got to brush your teeth. The Sonicare Sonic Toothbrush. It cleans with a combination of 31,000 brush strokes per minute and gentle sonic waves. Sonicare removes nearly twice as much plaque between teeth as a manual toothbrush, going where no brush has ever gone before. Sonicare, the Sonic Toothbrush.
A report tonight on the movement to make capital punishment tougher to impose. In Chicago this weekend, a conference attended by 30 people who were wrongly sentenced to death. Here's NBC's Ann Thompson.
Dale Johnston arrives at a conference that for him is a matter of life and death.
After you execute a guy, what do you say? Oops.
He's one of 75 people wrongly sentenced to death and now free. The flesh and blood reasons why 1,500 people, mostly death penalty critics, are in Chicago this weekend to discuss reforms.
We either have to reevaluate it or say we don't care.
19 people have been freed from death row in Florida, 9 in Illinois, 7 in Texas, 6 in Georgia. Mistakes law professor Lawrence Marshall says happen in part because poor defendants in capital cases often get bad legal representation.
We have lawyers who are overworked, who are very often inexperienced, and who are given no resources to try and, most importantly, to investigate the case. And that is number one on the reforms that have to be implemented.
Other reforms being considered include videotaping interrogations to ensure suspects are not coerced or tortured into confessions, and making sure there's enough time between conviction and execution to investigate claims of innocence. But some victims' rights advocates fear reforms are the first steps to abolishing the death penalty.
They parade people who have been erroneously convicted, but they don't talk about people who have been erroneously released from death row, that have gone on to murder other people.
Dennis Williams would argue that because he sat on death row for a murder he didn't commit, the real killer, now in prison, took at least one more life, and the system almost took his.
I'm an example, and I'm not the only example, that the death penalty is dangerous.
What they hope to come up with in Chicago is a way to eliminate mistakes. Ann Thompson, NBC News, Chicago.
When NBC Nightly News continues in a moment, an update on our top story, the standoff with Iraq tonight, as American troops continue to head off this evening, departing for the Gulf.
When I feel fresh, I'm always looking forward.
Exploring, discovering.
With Always panty liners, that freshness leaves you free to be and do what you choose.
Being spontaneous, taking chances.
Only Always odor-absorbing panty liners have a unique core and fresh weave cover that work together to help keep moisture and odor away from you. For that always fresh feeling, every day.
Getting close.
Being myself. All Days panty liners from Always. Feeling fresh is being free.
Searching for an echinacea to help support your immune system? Nature
Nature's Resource knows you should look for an echinacea that contains glycolic acid and polyphenols to get results. And unlike some, Nature's Resource guarantees the potency and purity you need. Make your herbal resource Nature's Resource. Follow the knowledge.
When arthritis pain hurts, you want relief fast. But some pills can cause stomach irritation. Rubs can have odor. Aspercream's different. Rubbing an Aspercream relieves minor arthritis pain. No stomach irritation, no odor. Aspercream. Pain relief without aspirin.
Charlie, you know how we're always trying to find something to watch?
Yeah?
Well, now we can get Prime Star satellite TV installed for just $49.
Ooh.
$49? This could be the greatest thing that ever happened to us.
$49 installed, Chuck. Think of the movies.
Movies? Chuck, think of the sports.
Let's get it. Okay. He's gonna get it.
All right.
Right now, get Prime Star installed for just $49. Call 1-800-PRIME-STAR or visit your local Radio Shack.
Is there only one way to deal with this man? The time for decision is near. The showdown with Saddam. MSNBC, when you really want to know.
Updating now the situation in the Gulf. We now know that Iraq came within 30 minutes of a U.S. cruise missile launch order when it issued a letter this morning seeking a solution. Now, tonight, Iraq insists its invitation for UN inspectors to return is unconditional. However, the White House says Iraq's letter is filled with conditions and is therefore unacceptable. So the military option, according to the White House, still very much alive. The president has canceled a planned trip to Malaysia. He will talk with allied nations before deciding on the next step here. The U.S. military remains in a state of high readiness tonight. That readiness, by the way, includes a number of military bases stateside where they're still shipping out this evening, ready for action in the Gulf if called upon. NBC's Monique Braxton on those who are on the move.
From military bases all across the country, they are still heading to the Persian Gulf, prepared to wage war if diplomacy can't ensure peace. An F-16 combat wing from South Carolina left this morning. 6 heavy B-52 bombers leaving Louisiana today. 3,000 Army troops from Georgia are preparing to leave loved ones behind. This soldier is the mother of a 7-month-old.
I'm gonna miss her first walk, her first talking, and so that's the hardest thing.
Already in the region, 23 ships and enough planes to send more than 300 Tomahawk missiles raining down on specific targets in Iraq if that becomes necessary. The Air Force Air Combat Command Center is sending a dozen F-15s from Virginia along with the wing's commander. Colonel Gary Dulesky is leaving a wife and 2 children behind.
I know he's happy to be there. His guys are there, so he wants to be there with them. So it sounds strange, but I'm happy for him that he gets to be there.
But a new bride was tearful today, reflecting on separation during the holidays.
I wish and I hope and I pray that he doesn't get into harm's way, but this is his job, and he loves his job, and I know he's good at what he does.
The families know that nothing can be taken for granted. 4 crewmen headed to the Gulf aboard the aircraft carrier Enterprise died Sunday while practicing landings. For military families, death is a fact of life. Monique Braxton, NBC News, Hampton, Virginia.
And that is NBC Nightly News for this Saturday evening. A reminder, stay with this NBC station for late live updates, continuing coverage, of course, available on MSNBC on cable and on the website, msnbc.com. I'll see you later tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern and hope to see you each weeknight at that time, 9 Eastern for the news on MSNBC and again on CNBC each evening at 10. I'm Brian Williams reporting tonight from New York. Good night, everybody.
NBC News, America's news leader.